7 things you wish you knew about money just a little bit earlier.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, Brian, I'm super excited about this show because have you ever had those things in life where somebody tells you something, they drop some knowledge bomb on you and you're like, I wish that I had known about that. Like I think about in your life, one of the things you wish you had known about earlier was like nice laundry detergent. You found out about that way too late in life.
Toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper, another huge one. There are some things that if I just knew about this earlier on, it could make my life better. What we want to do today is kind of walk through some of those financial things that maybe you haven't caught on to yet, or maybe if you have caught on to, it'll resonate. You're like, you know what? They're so right. That is so true.
So these are kind of like knowledge hacks, shortcuts to help people if you're young, starting out, or just you need to know more about money, these are things that can help you improve your finances.
Right. Yep.
Well, let's jump right into these. The number one, because this is a big one, having money is like being cool. Now, Bo, I know you're going to jump on this, but I think about I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and there used to be all these movies where you'd have the nerd who was like cutting grass and, and then he's daydreaming as the cool kids drove by in their convertibles trying to figure out how he could be part of it. And what you typically find out in the crescendo of the movie at the most critical point is as soon as he realizes he doesn't have to act cool or try to impress somebody is when he realizes he actually is cool.
That's exactly right. If you are someone that is cool, you don't have to try to be cool. And what we found out is that money is kind of the same way. It's so amazing to me as we meet friends or meet people out in the community, and they, especially, where we live, they want to kind of like show off. They want to kind of flex because they think that it's going to give off this impression of, oh, look how successful I am. Look how well I've done. Well, what we found in our experience is that often like wealth, true wealth, is not something that can be seen. It's not something that is showy and flashy.
Well, this book, we all know Millionaire Next Door has obviously had a huge impact on me, but Dr. Stanley also had another book called Stop Acting Rich. And then here's the second part of it, and start living like a real millionaire. Because so much of life is, we think, as somebody who's aspirational is we have to act the part. I was out in last January. I was in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. This is all pre-COVID. And I remember my friend and I stopped at every watch shop because he wanted to look at all the different watches. And then, you're like, all these designer things, all these things cost a fortune. Yep. But why? Because here's what we know about wealth. I think about 2 of the richest people on the planet.
Yep.
And they're definitely not as concerned about style or what they wear. Because, look at this. For those who do not have YouTube and have the visual, this is Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and it says $162 billion combined and not a single Gucci belt in sight. And by the way, they look like they are the nerdiest guys on the planet.
But I love it because no one would question, these guys obviously have reached the pinnacle of wealth. And yet they don't focus on trying to look like that. They're not trying to look like they are wealthy. They're not trying to give off that image or that facade. They actually have the wealth to back up.
Well, think about Zuckerberg. For years, everybody was talking about his hoodies, because that's what he wore. Yep. And then Steve Jobs and his mom jeans and the black turtleneck that he wore because he wore the same outfit every day because he didn't want to have to make a decision in the morning. These are all the type of behaviors. They're not worried about cool, but they get there, and it's kind of like that with rich. If you do it right, you don't have to look rich. And we even have, we took some stats and facts from Stop Acting Rich, and this is what we found out about millionaires.
Yeah, what I love about this is obviously, these 2 are billionaires. Well, let's take it a step further to like people in everyday life. Millionaires don't generally tend to act like they're rich. And just like you said, this is from Stop Acting Rich. One of the first things that was found in this book was that millionaires spend about $16 on haircuts.
Now, the data point was from 2009. When we were doing this in pre-show, I was like, there has been a little inflation.
I'm about to say, there's a little bit of inflation.
Because I don't even know if you can get a haircut at Great Clips anymore for $16. So. But it's a point that you don't hear about, because it's not uncommon to hear about politicians or celebrities that spent hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars on a haircut. The average millionaire spends $16 back in 2009.
Yep, another fun little statistic is that 4 in 10 millionaires own a bottle of wine under $10. So they're not out there buying the stuff off the top shelf. They're going to the local wholesale grocery store and getting the $9 bottle of wine that probably tastes just as good.
And then on vehicles, the average car, they spend around $31,000. Daniel thinks that stat's a little ridiculous, though, because he put a 1976, Oldsmobile on his visual. I don't know where that picture that Daniel chose.
I don't know that most millionaires are driving that, but they do drive very reasonable cars. They recognize that it's not about status symbols that cements their wealth. It's about actually having the wealth, not pretending and trying to look like they have wealth. Me, Brian, we do this all the time. Earlier on in life, folks would say to us, "Oh, so-and-so, they've got the house and they've got the car and they've got the boat. Man, they definitely got money." And we always remind them, no, that doesn't show that someone has money. That just shows that somebody has the ability to spend money.
Yeah.
When you see all the trappings, it is more a reflection of their consumption behavior than it is of their saving and wealth building behavior.
So my advice, here's the way I would think about this. And Bo, I think we both reflect this, is that I think we have a lot of audience that's probably aspirational.
Sure.
Successful, meaning you're getting traction in your career. You're starting to make more money as you have success in your career. I just want to tell you, don't feel the pressure. I think sometimes with success, you feel like society tells you in order to be successful, you have to look successful, and you get on this treadmill of buying bigger, nicer, because you want to flex in some way. But the reality is you don't. I mean, look around and see how many people are wearing smartwatches versus the Rolexes of the people you probably aspire to be. And then, Bo, you're very comfortable with it's not a minivan, but you drive what we pick on you as a mom's car.
Look, you know why? Because my wife formerly was a mom car. It was my wife's car, and then we got her a new one. And so rather than me going out and getting myself a new car, I drive the white mid-sized SUV, and it works just fine for me. Because I don't care. I don't feel like I have to have a nice car as a status symbol. And the reason why I don't is because I've recognized one of the practical guidelines is I focus on those things that are truly valuable. And so if you want to figure out how you sort of buck the trend, figure out how you can focus on value when it comes to your consumption decisions.
So we've even tried to give you some guardrails or guidelines of how to make sure your life stays in check so your eyes don't get bigger than your wallet. For instance, housing. We like you to keep your housing affordable so you don't get into that pickle of a situation where you're house rich, life poor, because that is the biggest pull on your finances. Yep. So we like you to keep your house payment and expenses to below 25% of your gross income.
And then when it comes to automobiles, we want you to subscribe to 23/8. You want to put 20% down when you buy a car. You don't want to finance it for any more than 3 years. And all of your auto payments, no matter how many cars you have, cannot exceed 8% of your monthly income. If you can keep it inside of that range, then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Now, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I could go out and buy a new car right now, and I could follow the 23/8, but my mom car is rocking and rolling.
It's paid for.
It's paid for. You have to answer the question, what do you truly value? And for me, I value building my investment accounts, building wealth more so than replacing that automobile prematurely.
We talk about this. We're going to come to it later in the show with some of these other key points. But little decisions while you're so young, in your 20s and even 30s, have a big ripple effect. And that's why when we do a 20%, 3 years, 8% rule, 23/8, I want you to know there's a little bit more on the guardrails, is that luxury cars, I want you to pay those off same as cash, because if you can buy a fancy brand, an expensive brand, you need to make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to. And that's why we also say no car payment should ever exceed what you're actually putting in the markets. It's going to break my heart to find out you have an $800 a month car payment, but you're only putting $200 a month in your investments. No, I always want the scale of investments versus outflows on depreciating assets like vehicles to definitely weigh the scale down on the investments. Investing yourself first before you're going into those depreciable assets.
I think if Warren or Bill were here, they would share this same little mantra with you, being wealthy is a lot cooler than looking wealthy. So if you can practice that, you're going to set yourself up for success.
No doubt. So number 2, time is more valuable than money. Now, we were in pre-show prep. We were like, Daniel, in that graphic, it's looking like money and time are equal. And I can tell you, and I think this is just Daniel's a little bit younger. But as you get older and more sentimental like me, you do recognize that it does feel like the resource of time is moving so quickly that you have to focus on making everything purposeful, everything actionable, so you don't waste this valuable resource.
Yeah, Brian, I want to give you a lot of credit. This is one of the ways I feel like through our relationship, this is something you've mentored me on a ton, especially for young folks who are super driven and super motivated. We get so caught up in, I got to get to the next thing, the next achievement, the next. And we push so hard that we don't stop and recognize, man, one of the things I ought to really be thankful for, one of the things I ought to really enjoy is the journey that I'm on. It makes sense to recognize that while I do want to have that career achievement or I do want to hit that next milestone, realistically, time right now is likely the most valuable resource that all of us have, especially folks that are younger.
Well, time cuts 2 ways. I want you to know you have a limited amount of time that you have to put the money to work, your financial resources, so you get the best version of yourself. But also, time is very powerful in the fact that you need to build memories. That's what you were just hitting on, is that you need to enjoy each stage of your life because you're going to find this moves very quickly. And to have proof of that, think about one of the richest men that have ever lived on this planet was T. Boone Pickens, who passed away in 2019, and he was known for giving graduation speeches, trying to inspire people who were trying to figure out how do they have the success he had. And what he used to end a lot of his graduation speeches with is the following quote.
He'd say, I'd always offer these future leaders a deal. I would trade them my wealth and success, my 68,000-acre ranch and private jet, in exchange for their seat in the audience. That way, I told them, I'd get the opportunity to start over. I'd experience every opportunity America has to offer. He'd then say, it's your shot now. So I would trade all my success, all my trappings, all of my wealth if I just had a little more time so that I could do it all over again.
So, my biggest takeaway for those that are younger is don't take time for granted. Don't get busy doing nothing. Make sure that time is a valuable part of, are you planning for the future? Are you investing for the future? Have you began with the end in mind so you even know where you are in your journey? Do not take this resource for granted.
So that's kind of the sentimental sort of touchy-feely idea of it. There's also a mathematical implication to just exactly how valuable time is. And so Daniel helped us run through a really interesting case study. And we said, all right, let's assume that we have a handful of individuals that are going to invest, and all they're going to do is they're going to max out their Roth IRA for a decade. So we're going to have an individual that maxes out their Roth in their 20s, and then we're going to look at one that does it in their 30s, and then one that does it in their 40s. And we want to say that with the exact same amount of money saved, it's just, the standard $6,000 per year over a 10-year time period, with these 3 individuals saving the exact same, how different does the picture look? So if we take our person that started in their 20s and they decided to max out their Roth IRA every single year in their 20s, so they save a total of $60,000. And let's assume because they're in their 20s, they can earn about a 10% rate of return on average over their investing career. By the time that they get to age 65, that $60,000 invested will have turned into over $1.5 million.
That's unbelievable.
Remember, they stopped at 29. They only did this through their 20s, and then they stopped saving. That $60,000 will have turned into $1.5 million.
Talking about the power of your army of dollars and compounding growth, this is it, guys. And I want you to see, because we did this for the 20s, but now we're going to go for the 30s. Same amount of money, same 10 years, same $6,000. So $60,000 once again invested. We heard for 20-year-olds that money turned into $1.5 million. What happens for 30-year-olds?
Yeah, for 30-year-olds. Now again, we're a little bit further out on our timeline, so we're going to drop the rate of return to 9% for someone who starts in the 30s. That $60,000 invested by age 65 still turns into almost $600,000, which is fantastic. $60,000 turns into $600,000, but it's $1 million less than what their 20-year-old counterpart was able to accomplish.
Well, look at that. I mean, that's almost, I mean, we basically took away almost 2/3 of the money.
Yep.
Just because of time. Not because incrementally there was any decision or value difference between 60,000. The only difference here was when the money
That's
was put to
exactly
work.
right.
Time was the component that changed this. And then take it for a 40-year-old. Still amazing what your money can do. Same $60,000, $6,000 a year for a decade. Turns into $251,000 by retirement. That's great because look at that. You're getting a over 4-time multiple.
Yep.
That's an incredible growth opportunity. But that same money for a 20-something turns into $1.5 million. This shows you just the value of just letting that money percolate, grow, and build deeper roots, grow it just more and more. Those trees really can continue to grow and make all your dreams come true.
So our hope is that you will learn and figure this out early on, because if you're a financial mutant, what if you're someone who says, I don't want to just save for 1 decade. I want to start saving and I want to keep saving. What if you're someone that starting at age 20, all that you ever did was max out your Roth IRA? You just did $6,000 every year for your entire working career. Well, from age 20 until age 65, you would invest a total of about $270,000. And that $270,000 invested would turn into over $2.5 million. And all you did was figure out just how valuable time can be if you start early.
So hopefully that's something that gets you energized, because look, I know $6,000 if you're 20 years of age is a lot of money, but it is still something I think is doable. If you make the concerted effort to, I'm going to put this much money to work. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have $500 a month working for me. You can do it, guys. And $2.5 million, I don't care what you say about inflation or anything else that's coming down the pipe for us. It is a lot of money with just a little bit. It totally is that deferred gratification concept where you take a little tiny bit of today for that great, big, beautiful tomorrow. It really is one of those things where, look, Bo says this the best, is that, the best time to start investing was yesterday.
Yep.
But Bo, what's the rest of that?
If the best time to start was yesterday, that means that the second best time to start investing is today. Don't waste the time that you have available to you right now.
So make it happen. And that leads to number 3. Your financial life doesn't have to be complicated.
Now, Brian, I got to confess to you, this is one that I fell prey to. When I was a much younger man, I assumed that in order to be wealthy, in order to amass any level of success, it had to be complicated. You had to go out there and study the stock charts, and you had to figure out things that other people didn't figure out, and you had to get in early on the deal. And when I learned about IPOs, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get in on those things. I was under the impression that the more complicated it was, the more sophisticated it was, the more difficult it was to understand, surely that would relate to more wealth and bigger numbers and higher success rates.
I fell into the same trap. I mean, I think I've shared this story before, is that being a person coming right out of college, working for a public accounting firm, doing taxes, I can realize, coming from not much in resources, doing taxes now and actually doing tax returns for people who have success, I was like, wow, a lot of these people have rental property. They have K-1s from businesses they own. And then you see all these complicated things on their returns. You're like, whoa, that's going to be so cool to have all these complicated things in my life in the future. But the reality is that complication does not necessarily create that success.
That's right.
And if you can create, creating wealth is actually a very simple concept. All you have to have is a little bit of discipline. That's that deferred gratification we're talking about, where you take a little bit of today for that great, big, beautiful tomorrow. And then you've got to turn that into money, meaning if you can live on less than you make, turn that into money that gets invested, and then you have enough time. That's the third component. It is that simple to create wealth. You do not have to go out and try to make this as complex as possible. And that's why when seminar attorneys or seminar financial planners, after they give you the steak dinner and talk about annuities, they always make things seem so much more harder than they actually are.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when someone has some level of success. They begin making good decisions and they begin building wealth, and the portfolio reaches a critical mass size. And all of a sudden, they now have wealth all of a sudden they arrive at this conclusion, oh, the thing that I've done my entire life to get me here wasn't good enough. Now, yeah, I did the mutual funds and I did the ETFs and I did the index funds. Well, now I got to start picking stocks, or now I got to get involved in the private equity, or now I need the crazy complicated estate plan, even though my estate's nowhere near $11 million. Don't let yourself fall into the trap. Brian, you coined this and you've said it to me so many times, and I've heard you say it over and over and over again, and I've now lived through this. It's amazing that as you have success and as your wealth builds, complication will have a way of finding you. You do not have to go seek it out.
Yes, please keep your life as simple as long as possible, because you don't have to seek it out, as Bo said, because it will happen. One day you're going to wake up and go, how did I get this complex tax return? And that's the beauty of the abundance cycle, and why we can give away tons of free advice. We know if you come learn, apply, grow your wealth to a level, the complexity will naturally happen. You will graduate beyond just what we can teach on the podcast, on YouTube, and you'll need to partner with a financial advisor, and that's when we'll take the relationship to the next level. So, practical application. If you can make something simple, make it simple.
I'm amazed at how many people often get, when they come in and we see all their accounts from all these different institutions, and we're like, hey, right now, you have 13 different investment accounts. We could probably distill that down to 4 or 5 and consolidate. And they're like, well, I can do that. Yeah, you can do that. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Complication will find you. Don't feel like you have to seek it out.
I think that is a great segue into number 4. Lazy investing is the best investing. And that sounds so contrarian. You would think that the harder you work, because I'm a hard work advocate. I feel like sometimes you sleep the best after you've done a hard day of work. If you're splitting firewood, if you're working out in the yard, you sleep like a baby that night because you felt like you put a good day of work in. How is it possible that with money, being lazy actually gets rewarded?
Is a benefit. Yeah.
So let's talk about this. I mean, one of the first things we talk about is active management versus passive or index investing. You would think this person over here who's paid handsomely for what they do would totally do better and be rewarded for their hard work versus just buying the index, because indexes are boring. Unfortunately, the data does not support that.
Yeah, so when we look at the SPIVA study from 2020, they look at, how often do index funds beat their active manager counterparts. It was amazing to find that when you look at large U.S. companies, 87.7% of active managers underperform their stated index, meaning that those funds, those dollars deployed, would have been better off over this 15-year time period that they're looking at just buying the index. Yep. There's a very small portion. So then you think, okay, well, what about like mid-cap? Surely smaller size companies do better. Mid-cap managers, 82.2% underperformed their index over that 15-year period. Small cap managers, it was also 82% of active managers underperformed the index. And then when you look at international, so non-US, non-domestic investments, 87.8% of active managers underperformed their index over a 15-year period. So we are of the opinion that rather than trying to beat the market, there's nothing wrong with just being the market, buying into the market, using index funds, and capturing the growth in those asset classes.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of common sense if you think about what's the why on this. Index funds are incredibly affordable and cheap. I mean, they're practically free on their internal expenses. If you're running an active management shop, you have trading costs, you've got to pay the managers, and then they're not even as tax efficient. That's the other thing, because since turnover creates more taxable transactions, index funds just don't have that much change going on, because once again, lazy investing can be the best investing. It just works out in the long term that the cost savings, the tax efficiency just turns out to be that extra oomph that gives you the better performance.
Now, so Brian, I can already hear the folks out there saying, no. Hey guys, I got to figure it out. I know how to read it. I know how to read the tea leaves. I can hear some of our dear friend audience people reach out and say, no, you can pick the active manager. You got to do a little bit of work. You just got to be really good. So we said, okay, let's operate under that premise. And let's assume that you're the best investor ever. And not only can you figure out what to invest in, you know the asset class to use, you can figure out the exact perfect time to put your dollars to work.
Well, what I love about this illustration we're about to go over is that we've done on the other shows the world's worst investor, where we took somebody who actually bought on the tippity top peak of the market, and then we showed how long term, even if you just stayed consistent, you would be rewarded, because once again, lazy investing, you couldn't outsmart yourself. But a lot of you people, a lot of our financial mutants are smart. Because you'll say, gosh, I wish you guys would have upside down that and showed what happens if somebody really does have that magical crystal ball where they could invest at the bare bottom of the market. Because that's what I think a lot of us try to do when we're doing this internal struggle of, do we time the market? Like, markets are overvalued right now. I hear that constantly. So why don't we wait until we can buy low and then sell high later? That is always the emotional fear and greed battle that's going on, is let's just wait until it's cheaper. So what if you actually had a superpower let you buy at the dead bottom of the market? Would that actually help you?
So let's look at it. In 1980, according to the United States Social Security Administration, we know that the average income was $12,513. And because all of you out there are financial mutants, we know that you would have been saving 25% of your gross income, or about $260.70 a month. And you recognize, I'm going to wait for the bottom and I'm going to hit the nail on the head. So I'm going to invest at the bottom of Black Monday. I'm going to invest in October of 1990. I'm going to do October 9 of 2002 at the bottom of the dot-com bubble. I'm going to catch the Great Recession at the bottom on March 9th, 2009. And then I'm even going to capitalize on COVID, the March 23rd to 2020. I'm going to get on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up cash. And when I hit these dates, I'm going to invest all that cash that I've built up. So if you look at it, we build up cash until October of 87, and then we invest it all. And then we start building cash again, and then we invest it all. We keep building and building and building and building and invest it. And this is what we found. If you are the absolute best market timer out there, you would have saved over this time period $129,308. But because you are such an astute investor, you turn that $129,000 into almost $1.8 million over that 40-year time frame.
So, I mean, look at the visual on this. Remember, I talk about investing is walking up a mountain with a yo-yo. Because that yo-yo is going up and down in the short term, but you're always walking up a hill. But this is even better in the fact that you were finding the low points on those hills, and that's when you were deploying and investing the money. That's pretty cool. This is what you think the superpower is valuable, but guys, this is what's crazy to me. When we did these data, I was like, wait a minute, go back. I want to see that number one more time. Is because you would think this is a valuable superpower. Sure. I mean, you could essentially conquer the world if you had this. This is like Back to the Future. You know the sports almanac. You know all the plays to make. But is it valuable? Because, I mean, right now there are people sitting on the sidelines because they think the market's overvalued. What if they were building up cash to do this exact same strategy where when the market goes down and reaches the bottom of the cycle of emotions, and when markets are cheap, they're going to go deploy those resources? Is that actually valuable? I think the answer will actually shock you.
Yeah, so we said, what if you had another investor who just did it systematically? They were boring, they were lazy, and they said, you know what, okay, I'm going to save my $260.70 a month. But rather than caring about the bottom of the market or the top of the market, I'm just going to invest every single month. No matter where the market is, I'm just going to put my money to work every single month. Well, what we found is that person would have saved the same $129,308, but instead of only having $1.8 million, the lazy, boring, non-active, uninvolved investor has almost $2.1 million.
I need people to understand that this is not a dollar difference. This is an incremental decision difference, not a money difference. They put the exact same dollars to work. It's just one had the superpower of knowing when markets were going to be down, investing their money on those dates. The other one just said, set it, forget it, automatic for the people. I'm going to make my investment process not matter. If it's raining outside, if bad things are going on in another part of the world, I don't care. I'm going to buy the same time each month. And somehow That is more powerful. The consistency, the automation of the behavior, the habit of the behavior is more powerful than the superpower of knowing when markets are going to be at the bottom.
So what's the practical application here? We think you really ought to know where you are in your wealth building journey. You know, I have folks all the time ask me, "Hey, you're a financial advisor. How'd you do last month? What'd your market got beat up last week? How'd you do?" I have no idea. I'll be honest, because I just do not stay tuned in to my performance, because I know that with my timeline, I care way more about how much I am putting to work than what those army of dollar bills are doing this day or this week or this month. So you need to understand where you are in your financial life cycle and what things you should be focused on.
Yeah, and practical application, know where you are in your journey. In the beginning, it's just like Bo said, building up your critical mass of assets. And I've talked about this in several times in examples. $500,000, market makes 20%. You've just added $100,000.
Big money.
When you have $50,000, you make 20%, you make $10,000. There's a huge difference between 10 versus 100, because you're probably replacing years of living expenses at that point. And that's why we talk about, if you know where you are in the journey, in the beginning, index target retirement funds, all you have to answer is 2 questions: is how much can I save? When do I need it? It does all the heavy lifting for you. Once you get over $500,000 to $600,000 in assets, there's some additional things that you want to start thinking about. And that's what I like. You still can use index funds, just like you use the index target retirement funds, but now you might want to get a little more diversification. Buy those funds individually so you can do loss harvesting. You can give appreciated securities to charity. You can also do tax location. There's all kind of fun things, but don't seek that complication out until you get that critical mass built up.
That's exactly right. All right. So now number 5, in terms of the 7 things that we want you to know about money, or that we hope that you figure out about money early on in your wealth building journey, is that money doesn't watch the news, does not pay attention to the headlines.
I get a visual on this one. I mean, it really does. I don't know what Mr. or Mrs. Money looks like, but I get a visual of them actually in front of the TV, and or you can, as Daniel found us,
reading
a
the
newspaper.
newspaper.
And it's true. I mean, I think sometimes we make so much out of news media, and we let the short-term panics, because I do feel like, remember, how does the media get paid?
No one eyeballs.
It's not from, getting you to watch that segment. It's by selling advertising. That's what they need: your eyes, they need your ears, they need your attention long enough so they can sell more ads. And guess what they found out? Happy news about puppies, kids graduating, and just fun, feel good stuff.
Stock market gains.
It doesn't really play that well. The whole, if it bleeds, it leads, is true with media and finance, and they've realized negativity is going to keep your attention much more than great positive stuff. And as part of that, they show, and they focus on politics, pandemics, all the negative sides of the economy. They want to do everything in their power to try to help you not build wealth for yourself, but to keep your attention. And that's a distinction you definitely need to understand.
And it seems to us that there's very little accountability for being very, very wrong. Again, this is an illustration that Daniel put together for us. If we just go back to the Great Recession, the last significant downturn that we saw pre-COVID, here are some of the headlines we've seen since then. The risk of a double-dip recession is rising. Time to say it, double-dip recession may be happening. Oh, why? America's big banks are predicting a recession. 6 signs we're closer to the next recession than you think. Wall Street thinks a double-dip recession is more likely than a V-shaped recovery. All of these headlines came out over this 10 to 12-year period, and yet in the background, the S&P 500 kept just bebopping along. That yo-yo up the mountain kept moving higher and higher and higher and higher.
I mean, even think about, we just came through the pandemic. 2020 was just an odd year. And you see the headline, Wall Street thinks a double-dip recession is more likely than a V-shaped recovery. And this is after the V-shaped recovery had already made the V.
In a V-shaped
They were just
recovery.
saying we were basically turn this thing into a W. But what did it do? It kept walking
That's
up
right.
the mountain. Nobody wants you to understand this. The press, the financial media, they don't know what is going to happen next any more than anybody else. What we do know is that, look, technology, innovation. Humankind wants to be better, more successful, and they want to continue to innovate and make life easier. I'm betting on that. If you look at the pace of innovation, it is accelerating, not decreasing. If you look at the number of breakthroughs we make every decade now versus what we were doing every 50 years, you'll see that we are accomplishing so much that 20 years from now, we can't even imagine.
That's right.
All you are doing when you invest is you're buying into a little bit of that future success. Don't let anybody try to sway you that we're breaking everything down. You will be a part of the success. You just have to make the decision. Do I want to own it, or am I just only going to live it?
So, what's the practical takeaway, or how can you use this knowledge to your benefit? Well, we think the big thing that you need to really understand is there's a difference in information and actionable information, and they are not often intertwined. Just because you have a piece of information does not mean that it warrants an action or a reaction to that information.
What's funny to me is we come up with show topics every 2 weeks. Well, we have a whole list. We have a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard. But when we put up with these, we don't know what's coming down the pipe. And then it's so interesting. You don't even have to try because this stuff just writes itself. We know that the pipeline got hacked. We all know that Colonial Pipeline got hacked. And here it is. Gas pipeline hack leads to panic buying in the Southeast.
That is information.
Yeah, that is information. I don't know that I consider that actionable information other than if you're driving by a gas station, you see that it's open. Okay, if you want to feel, I get it. You're reasonable. But that does not mean, what it does not lead to is that we need to start putting gasoline in trash bags and then putting them in the trunk of our car. That is not actionable information. And yet this is the panic that I see so many people in the public. Now, fortunately, not so many people in the public are throwing gasoline in the trunk of their car. I mean, this is just asking for horribleness to happen to you, to the point that, look at this. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission has to actually put on their Twitter feed to not do this behavior. This is why we have instructions on shampoo bottles, is that there are people out there that are just pushing the limits on what you consider common sense. Information does not always have to be actionable, and you need to understand that. A lot of the stuff that comes through your TV, through your radio, through the internet is information you can absorb, but don't necessarily turn it into actionable items.
So the practical takeaway for you from an investment standpoint is if you see a headline or a news story, an article that says pending double dip recession is coming, you should ask yourself, well, is that going to affect me? Or do I have a plan in place that whether the recession does happen or does not happen, I have followed the financial order of operations, I have emergency reserves, and I have a portfolio that matches my unique risk tolerance and risk capacity so that, if there's a double dip recession, I'm going to be okay. I don't have to react. And if the market keeps going up, I'm going to be okay. I don't have to react. That's the place that you want to be in, not the place where you're trying to scramble and you make some very disastrous long-term decisions to solve a very short-term problem.
And I think that we've got a good segue into number 6, which is you don't have to be a lone wolf.
Yep.
I think a lot of people, look, you guys are financial mutants. You're watching a financial show. You're either listening to it on YouTube, on a podcast format, or you're watching this on YouTube. So you already have an aptitude to make good decisions. But I think sometimes us do-it-yourselfers, we are scared to go out there and ask for help.
Sure.
It is the typical, you hear about that stereotype, you're trying to get to a destination and you find out you took a left turn somewhere. And man, I struggle with this too, is that do you ask for directions? In the days now we take for granted. We have, as long as we have a signal, we can just type it in on our phone, it will fix it. But in the past, you had to actually pull over and ask for help.
Yep.
And I think that's sometimes what we fall prey to in this new world where you can go at the type of Google or YouTube, you can figure out how to change the key fob, the battery in your key fob.
Yep.
But there's things that are bigger than that.
Absolutely.
And that's the part, Bo, I'm proud of you. You've told me, now look, when you bought your new house, I sold you all my yard equipment.
Yeah, no, once again, being on the wrong side of a transaction with Brian Preston. It happens every time we do business together.
Are you still cutting your own grass now?
I am not cutting mine. This is a new change. Look, I loved it. I had this new, beautiful yard, and it was wonderful, but I recognized that, the 3 hours it was taking me to get my lawn cut and edged and weed eated every weekend was pulling away from things that I value more than that. I value being able to be there with my daughters and going out and actually playing in the yard. So I made the decision that, I should probably let the local neighborhood college kids cut my grass. And it has worked out swimmingly well for me.
Well, and I think that I'm going to apply this to more financial things, but I'm thinking about like tax preparation. I know so many people that I don't know if they get enjoyment or if it's just a part of that sleeping good at night because they did a hard day's work of doing their own taxes. But I have found when you reach a level of complexity, when I was a professional tax preparer, I typically could do it much faster, and I usually could find you additional deductions you didn't even know about. And that was a level where it was okay to ask for help. You didn't have to be that lone wolf. It's the same thing with estate documents. We have had this come up even with some of our financial associates. They're doing some estate planning, and they were downloading things from the internet. And we were like, what do you do? You are at a level of success. You need to probably get an attorney because what you're trying to accomplish with this trust for your children is more complex than a boilerplate answer that you're getting from the internet. And I'm tight too. I know we don't like to spend money. I would not ask you to spend money if I didn't see value. But there are sometimes where you are a penny wise, but what is it, a pound foolish? I mean, in the fact that you're saving a few bucks, but you might be opening yourself up for a lot of heartache later. I grew up in that household. I mean, my parents never. They were great savers, but their idea of investing was CDs. I always think about, sure, maybe they would have made somebody some money by hiring a financial planner or an investment advisor. But how much more money could they have had with their great habits of living on less than they made? They did the hard work, but they never actually put the money to work. They never let the army of dollar bills deploy and go start creating additional resources and wealth for them. And I think that's something that I would encourage people. Know when to go pro, know when to go when you don't know what you don't know, your blind spots that might impact you in the long term.
Yeah, Brian, I think that this last one, this seventh thing that we wish people knew about money as early as possible is one that I think often gets missed. And I think it's a big one. I think maybe it is the biggest one. That when you truly begin to understand wealth and understand wealth building and understand the financial journey that you're on, you will come to the realization that really money is just a tool.
Yeah. I think that we've done several shows on like the dark side of wealth. I think if you want to be wealthy just for the sake of being wealthy and you don't have a why, you don't know what gives you purpose and what's driving that decision making, you're going to find when you reach that actual number, like, I feel the same. What happened? I thought I was going to wake up in the morning and feel completely different than I did the day before. It just doesn't happen that way. And that's and a lot of you guys who are aspirational, you don't have wealth yet, you're like, I'd love to have that problem. And I get it. And I'm not trying to take away from the plight of building wealth, but I'm just telling you, you have to understand what the journey is for, why you even want to have this, and why you're taking the steps. Because if you have purpose, you're going to be much more understanding of what brings you happiness. You're going to be much more understanding of what brings you fulfillment, because there are different levels. You first make it your head above water. Then you next get it to where you can be happy. You have enough money coming in that you can pay all your bills. You can start saving for the future. And then it's only to that point that you reach financial independence and then reach fulfillment. We like to talk about it all the time. Is you often hear people talk about in practical applications. What are the stages of wealth? What I think most people are talking about is financial independence is I do what I want, when I want, and how I want. We've actually epitomized and broken it down to go a step higher on the levels of wealth to a level 5, which is even deeper. It says, you know who you are, you know what you value, and what brings you purpose. Meaning when you wake up in the morning, you know why you're getting out of bed, and it makes you a better person.
So I have a very close friend of mine who's many years older, and he kind of shared with me how he was able to go on his wealth journey. He said, here's a really practical thing that you do. No matter where you are in your wealth journey, if you're a 20-year-old starting out or you're at the middle of your life at 40, think about the level of wealth you want to achieve and what that means. Maybe it's you live in the really nice house with the swimming pool and the car, or you want to go on vacations, or you want to shop at a certain supermarket, or whatever the thing is, go ahead and try to visualize that level that you want to achieve and just take like a mental snapshot of it and then work to that level. And keep reminding yourself that that's what you're working towards. I'm working to that level, that level, that level. So that when you get there, you don't feel like you have to keep going higher. You don't feel like you have to keep swimming upstream. Focus on getting to that level and be content there, focusing on those things that truly do bring you fulfillment, that truly do give you purpose. If you can do that, you're not going to find yourself in that place where you're constantly chasing the next achievement. Because we've talked to tons of wealthy people said, man, I had this goal. If I could just get my income to $50,000 a year, that would be, well, if I could just make 75, well, if I could just get my portfolio to 100, or if I could just hit $1 million, you will be amazed. If all you're chasing is the number and not the why behind the number, that number will just keep moving further and further and further away from you.
The goalposts do constantly move. That's why we always talk about the struggle between fear and greed, is that there's this weird thing with human nature, and that's why I like you setting goals. Just like Bo said, take a snapshot, write it down. I even like the thought of writing down what those goals are, so that way when you actually accomplish it, you'll know you're there, and then you can figure out if you're tired of swimming upstream.
Yep.
Because there is this thing, remember, we talk about you're on a journey to creating wealth, but there's a whole new different skill set to keeping your wealth.
Right.
And that's the part, and it's not the easiest thing. Wealth is one of those slippery things. I've shared with you guys, yes, 80% of wealth of millionaires are first generation. But the sad stat is that by second, you have 70% have slipped away. By third generation, the grandkids, 90%. The whole cycle's repeated itself, so it's slippery. Wealth creation and then retaining wealth is a slippery endeavor. So you need to know what your why is, what brings you purpose, so you can enjoy it and actually, like I said, get that fulfillment factor, but also protect it and hopefully use this for good to help your family, your friends, your causes, so that you actually turn this into a legacy and not just this fleeting cautionary tale that I think happens a lot when you're talking about money.
And look, our charge is we're going to help you all along the way. Not only do we want to help you figure out how to grow your wealth, how to move up towards financial independence and abundance, we want to help you figure out how to keep your wealth over the long term. That's why we make resources available like the show on YouTube, like the podcast. If you've not gone to our website yet, go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have tons of free deliverables out there for you, all the way from how to refinance my mortgage, to what questions to ask if I want to hire an advisor, to how do I get my young people excited about saving for the future, and everything in between. So if you've not had a chance to go check out our resource page, go to moneyguy.com/resources and make sure you're using those to help you on your wealth building journey.
Yeah, and those resources are free.
Yep.
I mean, here's what I love about the free resources is that you're like, how does this even work? How can you guys keep loading us up? Look, this is the abundance cycle. You come learn, apply, grow, reach that level of success. It's going to happen. I can plant seeds. Bo can plant seeds. You're growing great big live oaks. Go have all this beautiful tree-lined driveway there like you see in all of your dreams. It will happen, and you're going to go, wow, how did I get here? And you're going to remember, we planted those seeds with you, and that's when you'll graduate and take the relationship to the next level, and we'll be here. We're both young enough that we're going to make these dreams happen. We just appreciate you guys going on this journey. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.